The Admiral's lips had already turned blue when they wheeled him through the emergency room doors at 11:47 p.m. His eyes were rolling back, his body convulsing in violent spasms that made the gurney shake and rattle against the linoleum floor. Nurse Rachel Brennan was finishing her shift, her feet aching after 14 hours on the floor, when she heard the commotion and turned to see something in the old man's face that made her blood run cold. This wasn't a heart attack. This wasn't a stroke. This was something else entirely. Male, 72, found collapsed at a restaurant, the paramedics shouted as they rushed him past. Unresponsive, severe respiratory distress, pupils constricted to pinpoints. We've administered oxygen but he's deteriorating fast. Dr. Kevin Morrison was already at the trauma bay, pulling on gloves. He was young, barely 3 years out of residency, and Rachel could see the uncertainty flickering across his face as he looked at the patient. Get me vitals, now. Rachel moved without thinking, her hands checking the monitor as numbers flashed across the screen. Heart rate erratic, blood pressure dropping, oxygen saturation at 73% and falling. She'd seen people die before, too many times in her 22 years as an ER nurse, but something about this felt different. Wrong. The way the Admiral's muscles twitched. The foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. The peculiar smell coming from his skin, faint but unmistakable. Like bitter almonds. Dr. Morrison, Rachel said quietly, urgently. Look at his symptoms. Pinpoint pupils. Excessive salivation. Muscle fasciculations. Respiratory failure. She paused, her mind racing through decades of training, through case studies she'd read, through a terrorism preparedness seminar she'd attended 15 years ago that everyone else had found boring. This looks like organophosphate poisoning. Could be a nerve agent. Dr. Morrison's head snapped up. What? Are you serious? I'm serious. We need atropine. Now. And pralidoxime if we have it. We can't just. Morrison hesitated, protocol warring with instinct on his face. Administering those drugs without confirmation was a risk. If Rachel was wrong, they could make things worse. If she was right and they waited for labs, the patient would be dead in minutes. The Admiral's body jerked again, harder this time. His breathing had become a wet, desperate rattle. Rachel leaned closer to Morrison, her voice low and fierce. Doctor, I've been doing this for 22 years. Trust me, if we don't act right now, he's gone. Something in her eyes must have convinced him. Get the atropine, Morrison ordered. 2 milligrams IV push. And somebody find out if we have pralidoxime in this hospital. Rachel's hands moved with practiced efficiency, drawing up the medication, finding the IV port, pushing the plunger. Once, twice, 3 times over the next 10 minutes, increasing doses as protocol demanded for nerve agent exposure. The other nurses stared at her like she'd lost her mind, but Rachel didn't care. She watched the monitor, watched the Admiral's face, watched for any sign that she'd made the right call. At first, nothing changed. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the Admiral's breathing eased. The convulsions began to lessen. His lips started to regain color. The numbers on the monitor crept upward, oxygen saturation climbing from 73 to 81 to 92. Oh my God, one of the nurses whispered. It's working. Doctor. Morrison looked at Rachel with something between awe and disbelief. How did you? Later, Rachel said. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline catching up with her. We need to isolate him. If this is a nerve agent, we need to decontaminate, protect the staff, and notify. She didn't get to finish the sentence. The doors burst open and 6 men in dark suits strode in with the kind of authority that made everyone stop what they were doing. They weren't doctors. They weren't hospital security. They moved like military, like law enforcement, like people who were used to rooms going silent when they entered. The man in front pulled out credentials that Rachel barely had time to read. Central Intelligence Agency. We need to secure this patient immediately. Everyone step back. Doctor. Morrison stepped forward, confused and angry. Excuse me, this is a hospital. That's my patient. You can't just. This is a matter of national security, the man said, his voice flat and final. The patient is Rear Admiral Thomas Caldwell, retired Naval Intelligence. We have reason to believe he was the target of an assassination attempt. This hospital is now under federal jurisdiction. The room went still. Rachel felt the weight of those words settle over her like ice water. Assassination attempt. National security. She'd saved a man who someone had tried to kill, and now the CIA was standing in her emergency room. One of the agents, a woman with sharp eyes and graying hair, approached Rachel. You're the nurse who treated him. Yes. What did you give him? Rachel explained the atropine protocol, the suspected nerve agent poisoning, the reasoning behind her split-second decision. The woman listened without expression, then turned to confer quietly with her colleagues. Doctor. Morrison was arguing with another agent, something about patient rights in hospital protocol, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. Rachel looked at the Admiral, now stable, now breathing, now alive because she'd recognized something most people wouldn't have seen. She thought about going home to her apartment, about crawling into bed, about forgetting this night ever happened. But the woman agent was back, standing close. Ms. Brennan, we need you to come with us. We have questions. I'm in the middle of my shift. Your shift is over. This is not optional. Rachel glanced at Morrison, who looked as lost as she felt. One of the other nurses, Carmen, touched her arm gently. Go. We'll cover for you. They took her to a small conference room on the hospital's third floor that had been converted into a makeshift command center. Laptops, phones, men and women speaking in low urgent tones. Rachel sat in a metal chair while the female agent, who introduced herself as Agent Sarah Vance, sat across from her. Tell me everything, Vance said. From the moment you saw Admiral Caldwell. Don't leave anything out. So Rachel told her. The blue lips, the convulsions, the smell of bitter almonds that maybe she'd imagined, maybe she hadn't. The way her brain had connected symptoms to a seminar from 15 years ago about chemical weapons and terrorism preparedness. Vance listened, taking notes, her face unreadable. When Rachel finished, there was a long silence. You saved his life, Vance said finally. If you'd waited for lab confirmation, he'd be dead. The substance we found in his system was a modified organophosphate compound. Extremely lethal, quick-acting. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Rachel's throat felt tight. Who would want to kill him? That's classified. Vance studied her for a moment. But I can tell you this. Admiral Caldwell spent 40 years in naval intelligence. He knows things. Dangerous things. Things that certain people would rather stay buried. She paused. You got caught in the middle of something very complicated, Ms. Brennan. And now we need to make sure you're safe. Safe. Rachel's voice cracked. What does that mean? It means whoever tried to kill the Admiral might want to finish the job, and they might see you as a loose end. We're going to have agents watching you for the next few weeks. Maybe longer. The room seemed to tilt. Rachel gripped the edge of the table. I just did my job. I'm a nurse. I help people. That's all I did. I know. Vance's expression softened slightly, but sometimes doing the right thing puts you in danger. I'm sorry. They let her go home at 3:30 a.m. with a business card, a phone number to call if anything seemed wrong, and the knowledge that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. Rachel drove through empty streets, her mind numb, and when she finally walked into her apartment, she sat on the couch without turning on the lights and cried. Not from fear, exactly. From exhaustion, from the weight of it all. Her phone rang at 8 a.m. She'd barely slept. Hello, Ms. Brennan, this is Agent Vance. The Admiral is awake. He's asking to see you. Rachel wanted to say no. Wanted to pull the covers over her head and pretend none of this had happened. But she got dressed, drank coffee that tasted like ash, and drove back to the hospital. They'd moved Admiral Caldwell to a private room on a secure floor. 2 agents stood outside his door. Inside, he was propped up in bed, looking pale but alert. His eyes were a sharp blue, and when Rachel entered, he studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. You're the nurse, he said. His voice was rough, damaged by the breathing tube. Yes, sir. Sit down, please. Rachel sat in the chair beside his bed. She didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone you saved from assassination? Agent Vance told me what you did, Admiral Caldwell continued. How you recognized the symptoms. How you insisted on the atropine protocol. He paused, and his eyes glistened. You didn't just follow orders. You thought. You remembered. You made a decision that most people wouldn't have had the knowledge or the courage to make. I was just doing my job. No. His voice was firm. You did far more than that. Do you know how many people would have hesitated? Would have waited for confirmation? Would have let protocol and fear override their instinct? He reached out, his hand shaking slightly, and touched her arm. You gave me my life back. And I need you to understand what that means. Rachel felt tears burning in her eyes. I don't understand any of this. Why someone would want to hurt you. Why the CIA is involved. Why I need protection. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. I can't tell you everything. But I can tell you this. I've spent my life serving my country. I've seen things, done things, learned things that I'll carry to my grave. Some people want those secrets to die with me. His jaw tightened. They tried to make that happen last night. But you stopped them. Are you afraid? Rachel asked quietly. Terrified, he admitted. But not for myself. For my daughter. She's 34, lives in Seattle, teaches elementary school. She has 2 kids. They're my whole world. His voice broke. If I'd died last night, I wouldn't have said goodbye. Wouldn't have told her I love her one more time. You gave me that chance. Rachel wiped her eyes. Have you called her? First thing this morning. She's flying in tonight. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, made him look younger, more human. She's furious with me, says I need to retire, move closer to her, stop getting involved in dangerous situations. He laughed weakly. She's probably right. They talked for another 20 minutes. The Admiral told her about his daughter, about his grandchildren who called him Papa Tom and made him watch cartoon movies. About his late wife, who'd died 6 years ago from cancer and who he still missed every single day. He was no longer just a victim, just a case, just a man someone had tried to kill. He was a father, a grandfather, a person with a life worth saving. When Rachel finally left, she felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but so was something else. Purpose, connection, the reminder of why she'd become a nurse in the first place. The next 3 weeks were strange. Federal agents followed her to work, to the grocery store, to her sister's house for Sunday dinner. Rachel tried to go about her life normally, but normal felt like a foreign concept. She kept thinking about the Admiral, about the daughter flying across the country to see her father, about the grandchildren who almost lost their Papa Tom. Agent Vance called her weekly with updates she couldn't share, reassurances that felt hollow. We're making progress. You're safe. Just a little longer. Then, 26 days after that night, Vance called with different news. We got them. The people responsible. It was a foreign intelligence operation, and it's been shut down. You're no longer in danger, Ms. Brennan. Your protection detail will be withdrawn tomorrow. Rachel should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt empty. Is the Admiral safe? Yes. He's being relocated, given a new identity. He'll disappear into a quiet life somewhere. It's better that way. Can I see him? Before he goes. There was a pause. I can arrange that. They met in the same conference room where Rachel had first been questioned. The Admiral looked better, stronger, healthier. But there was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. So this is goodbye, Rachel said, sitting across from him. I'm afraid so. He smiled sadly. I wanted to thank you one more time. In person. My daughter wanted to thank you too, but they won't allow it. Too risky. I understand. Do you? He leaned forward. Rachel. May I call you Rachel? What you did for me goes beyond medicine. You gave me time I didn't think I'd have. I got to hold my grandchildren again. Got to tell my daughter I love her. Got to watch one more sunrise. His voice thickened. Those extra moments, those days, they're everything. And I got them because of you. Rachel couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. I have something for you, the Admiral continued. He pulled out a small box and slid it across the table. Open it when I'm gone. Admiral, please, let an old man give a gift to the woman who saved his life. They sat in silence for a few minutes, two people who'd been thrown together by violence and chance, who'd given each other something precious, him, a reminder of why her work mattered, her, a few more years of life to spend with the people he loved. When he stood to leave, he took her hand in both of his. Take care of yourself, Rachel Brennan. The world needs more people like you. And fewer people trying to poison retired admirals, she said, trying to smile through her tears. He laughed, a real laugh. Agreed. Then he was gone, escorted out by agents, disappearing into whatever new life awaited him. Rachel sat alone in the empty room, holding the small box. She opened it carefully. Inside was a challenge coin, a military tradition. On one side was the naval intelligence insignia. On the other, an inscription, for Rachel Brennan, who saw what others missed and had the courage to act. You saved more than a life. You saved a family. TC. Rachel held the coin in her palm, feeling its weight, and cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming knowledge that what she did mattered. That in a world of violence and darkness and people trying to kill each other, she'd chosen to heal. To save, to fight for life. She went back to work the next day. Back to the chaos, to the endless stream of broken bodies and desperate families. But something had changed. When she looked at her patients now, she didn't just see cases or symptoms or protocols to follow. She saw fathers and daughters. She saw families and futures. She saw lives worth fighting for. 3 months later, Rachel received a postcard. No return address. Just a picture of a sunset over mountains and 4 words in careful handwriting, still watching those sunrises. She knew who it was from. Knew he was out there somewhere, safe, living whatever quiet life he'd been given. And she knew that somewhere, his daughter was grateful. His grandchildren were growing up with their Papa Tom. Because on one chaotic night, Rachel had seen what others missed and had the courage to act. She kept the challenge coin in her pocket during every shift. A reminder, a promise, that no matter how tired she got, no matter how heavy the burden, she would keep seeing. Keep fighting, keep choosing life over death, hope over despair, courage over fear. Because that's what nurses do. That's what healers do. They stand in the space between life and death and they refuse to let go. Even when CIA agents arrive 30 minutes later. Even when the stakes are higher than they ever imagined. Even when doing the right thing means stepping into danger. They save lives, one patient at a time, one decision at a time, one moment of recognition and courage at a time, and sometimes, if they're lucky, they get to know that the life they saved went on to matter. To love, to watch sunrises. Rachel touched the coin in her pocket and got back to work.